And we find that the first book that is written on the soldaderas was by Elizabeth Salas, a Chicana historian, where she looks at warrior women and goes into the archives of Mexico and brings forth a lot of new information. The next person who brings forth the ideas on the two feminist congresses of Mexico that were held in Yucatan in 1915 and 1916 under the very radical Governor Salvador Alvarado was Charlene Soto, who wrote on these two congresses. That was followed by a book by Ana Macias, a Mexican historian, who then wrote a very complete report on that. So we have the opening because of women who were looking to change their lives here in the States. And in Mexico soon after that, we have Mexican women historians who joined in and began to study women in the Mexican Revolution. But the women's movement in Mexico, intellectually for historians, really pulled them back to the colonial period. And we see that most Mexican women historians devote themselves to the colonial period and later the period of independence, whereas we have Chicana historians and then historians from the United States looking first at the revolution. This says so much about how our countries relate to one another. Because here in the Southwest, the Chicanas who were looking at the history of Mexican women in the revolution were mostly the granddaughters of women who had been in the Mexican Revolution. In Tucson, hundreds, if not thousands, of Mexicanos came as refugees. Arizona was a recipient of thousands of Mexicans who left Mexico. Some because they had defeated Porfirio Diaz, others because they had been defeated by Pancho Villa, others because they didn't agree with Obregón, whatever it was, or just simply to get away from the violence. But they brought with them those visions. And so what do we have here? We have women living on the border who continue to support Carranza, for example. We have all these stories of women who would smuggle guns back to revolutionaries. We have stories of women who would go to Agua Prieta and help the women of Pancho Villa when he attacked Agua Prieta. That is, the Southwest is ripe and filled with the experience of the revolution, of all of those that came here as a result of that. And in here, I'm sure that there are many experts on the revolution. It is something that has been studied by so many scholars, aficionados, people who devote their lives to collecting stories, collecting photographs, collecting songs. And so I'm sure that you can tell me dozens and dozens of stories of women in the Mexican Revolution. But the important thing is that historians have found new ways of looking at this very complex set of events. And we have here at the University of Arizona, where one of the scholars who has been attributed with changing the way that we view Dr. Daniel Nugent contributed greatly, he and Dr. Alonso, with their work on Nambichipa in Chihuahua. They, being the students or mentored by Dr. Katz, who died just recently, who probably has written the single most important interpretive book, The Lives and Times of Pancho Villa. No longer is the official narrative one that has just one strain. No longer is the official narrative one that is just filled with the guns and the statues and the pictures of Pancho Villa or Emiliano Zapata. But now we have a history that is looking to the complexities of all the different regions and all the different peoples and those struggles for power and that tremendous struggle against the Catholic religion. The Catholic religion, which in terms of gender, which in terms of women, has been one which has totally, I guess one can say, cut the wings of liberty for women and kept them confined. And that it is a struggle that continues to exist to this day. It is one which has not ended. The struggle for the minds of people in terms of the freedom for women to have an equal situation. So it's a challenge for those of us who try to understand these stories. We can understand each story by itself, maybe, but to have the context and to see where it's taking us is another challenge. And I'm sure there are many here who will have many stories to tell, and who maybe disagree with me greatly on the way I have seen it. But that is what is great about the history of the Mexican Revolution, is that there are many, many ways of looking at this very complex issue. And then we have these incredible films. The films that we were mentioning a few minutes ago, the films of Indio Fernandez, who, in the words of Elena Poniatowski, says, he shows the women as they are small and humble and following their men without any sign of rebellion. But when you read the oral histories of some of these women, what do you find? You find a story like the woman who ended up married to Emiliano Zapata's older brother. And she tells this beautiful story of how when she was 13 years old, her sister 14 or 15, it was heard in the pueblo that the Zapatistas were coming. So all the girls had to hide, and their father said, you have to go hide in the back and close all the windows and close the doors, because if they see you, they will take you. And she said, but I wanted to see him so badly. I had heard he was very good looking. And so when my father locked us up, I made sure that I was in the room that faced the door, the street, so I could open the shutter just a little bit and see him. And she said, and I did. When they came, I heard the horses and I opened, and he saw me. His eyes touched mine, and I knew he had seen me. And yes, that afternoon, a man came knocking at our door and said, El general quiere ver a su hija, quiere venir a visitar. The general wants to see your daughter, he wants to come visit.
Wow.
My father was furious, she said. But he didn't come. He sent his brother instead to get her. And she said, but he liked me, so he kept me. She was telling this story 40 years later, right? For 40 years, she was married to the man she didn't want. Maybe she learned to love him. But these are the stories that are in the oral histories. These are the stories that tell us a little bit about these women that are seen in photographs as bending over and small and submissive, right? But which carry so much different. And these corridos, which you will hear some and we will see some on the screen, they're all written by men. We have found no corridos that were written by women. So this is their vision. This is their view of the women they write about, of the hero women. I don't know if you use the word hero, but the hero women, the Juanes women, and what they did to help men. So now we will hear a song, a corrido, La Valentía.